Hi everyone, Kitch here, and welcome back to The Forgotten Coast, Episode 3. I can't believe how fast this is going. Already on Episode 3, I'm really excited about this project, and, let's just jump right into it. Today, we are working on some locker rooms on Storm Rock Island, which is the first section of the park that we started working on in Episode 1, and we will continue to work on until it is complete in a handful of episodes. Today, I actually had to cut this episode a lot shorter than I wanted to. I originally started with much more content and was going to cram it all into one episode and realized that it was just too much content. It was like a 55-minute episode, and I just thought it would be better to break it up, which is why the subject for today's episode is just locker rooms and nothing more exciting than that. But I hope that everyone stays along for the ride. I think you guys will appreciate the realism and the detail in these locker rooms. So this is them right away. The floor here, I chose a marble-ish texture kind of to mimic what like a bathroom floor might look like. And these are not going to be the only locker rooms in the park. We're going to have some kind of towards the entrance and in other areas. The idea is just to set up sort of a place that the guests can kind of use as a base camp to store their belongings, and maybe the kids really want to go on the thrill rides, and the parents want a place nearby that they can keep their stuff and be organized and all that good stuff. So these are what you're seeing right here is the showers. I actually had these pre-built in a previous park, and I just brought them in. They're pretty simple. It's just those concrete columns for the walls that I have colored that brown, and then we have the snowman pipe is actually serving as the shower head there, and then a couple pieces like the snowman pipe and the hanger, I believe, are used there for the handle of the shower itself, and then just the drapery pieces painted white for the shower curtain with an electrical cable actually as the curtain rod. It's one of the only skinny rod-like pieces that we have in the game, so you'll probably see me using it quite a bit. And don't worry, we have included a handicap stall on the end in both the men's and the women's. I'm trying to keep ADA in the back of my head as I work on this. I think ADA compliance is one of the most difficult things to incorporate in your park because people just forget about it. I mean, as terrible as that is, it's great to have that in any park, and I just think people kind of don't realize how much actually goes into that and how much ADA access and different things are included in a real park. So I'm going to try to keep that in the back of my mind and include as much of that as possible. I can't promise I'll meet every aspect of ADA compliance. I think an architect could probably point out many issues in my park by the end of this, but I will be trying my best keeping that in mind. So back to what we're working on here, still the showers. Finishing those up, and what I'm doing here, as you can see, is working first on the interior of the locker rooms, and I touched on this in the last episode, and that is designing interior first before exterior. And a lot of new builders don't struggle on interiors because they work first on the exterior. They make their walls, their shell, and sometimes you make the roof, and then what happens is you realize that you don't have enough space inside your building, or maybe your roof is pointing out in different spots, and it becomes kind of a hassle to build too because you're moving the camera around and you're inside the walls, and it's just difficult. And what I've found over the years of playing this game is that if you work on the interior first as much as you can, it actually makes your life way easier in the long run, and you can develop interior spaces that are much more realistic and much more accurate in their space. So this right here is the locker itself, and I've already built this in a previous park, but I decided to kind of break it apart here and just to show everyone the pieces that I used to build it, because you're going to see this locker duplicated in all the locker rooms throughout the park. And it's pretty simple. It's just a gray basic shape with, I think that's a Ghostbusters piece for sort of the pay thing where you would put your change in to check out the locker. And then the circle for the dial is a boom microphone that just sunken in and into the ground to make that perfect circle. And then the smallest firework, the Roman candle firework, turned kind of upside down and poking out. It just creates that 3D effect of the actual dial itself. And then just those hangers for the borders. So that's the locker, and then multiply that by 55 and you have the entire group of lockers. So next up here is a bench for the users and patrons to sit on as they're changing, etc. And another thing I want to touch on in this episode is something called a palette. And what I mean by that is sort of how you are theming. Part of your theme in any area of your park includes your colors. And your colors are really important because you want a variety, but you also want them to be consistent and in line with each other. Too little variety, and what you end up having is a very boring looking, drab park that just doesn't have that extra pop. Too many colors or too bright of colors, and you have something that just doesn't look cohesive, and it can almost be worse. So creating that color palette is really important. And what I've done here is, since this is Storm Rock, I've gone for more kind of pastel, grays, browns, blacks, sort of, worn in colors that you would see, in a stormy kind of nautical area. When you think of storms, you think of overcast and grays and etc. So that's kind of what I'm going for here, but you still need to have that little bit of color. So I've tried to accent it with bits of blue and, teals, and some lighter, whites and lighter browns. And that's kind of the palette I'm going for. And you can see the brick stone walls that are the outside of the locker room. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Have those little pops of color in there, the little teals, the light blue, just to give it a little more color and prevent that drabness. And really where the focus of the color palette, where I want that to be, is on the slides themselves. So you'll see that the slides themselves will actually be quite a bit brighter, stand out. And I think that works because, slides in real life, they want to draw your attention. They want to be bright. They want to stand out, and that's how, the guests see the slides and get to them and, say, oh, look at that slide. I want to go ride that. It's bright, it's colorful, and it draws the eye. So what you're seeing here is actually my attempt at a mirror, and we do not have a mirror piece in the game. So I tried to use glass as sort of the mirror, and the problem though was one shard or pane of glass was just too transparent, so you could see directly through it into the wall behind it. So what I tried to do is put about 10 of them in a row, and it just makes a slightly more opaque look to it and kind of blurs the background just a little bit. And I think that works for a representation of a mirror. It's not perfect, but given that we don't have a mirror in this game, I think it works. So those ones that you saw earlier, those would just be like your smaller mirrors, for putting on in your contacts or makeup or whatever it may be. And this, what we're working on here, is going to be more the mirror that would be behind the sinks and the hand washing station in the bathroom. So just a little bit of realism here with the cabinets where they may be storing different toiletry items and etc. So here, this is my attempt at the sink itself. I think that bowl is a really nice piece, and I did realize that the guests will probably need to actually use this. It needs to be somewhat functional, so I threw in a couple restrooms on both the men's and the women's side, just to get the guests to walk through there. Now, pathing is in this game, as we all know, is kind of a pain in the butt, so you can see me finagling around with the path here, just trying to get it to work. Sometimes all it takes is just a little persistence, and you can get it to sort of go exactly how you need it. The snowman pipe, I found myself to be using this piece so many times in the last few episodes. It's really useful just because it's got that nice kind of glossier texture that can be used for a lot of different things, and it's just got that straight piece but also the kind of curved piece, so it just serves as a lot of different uses for that one piece alone. So kind of touching back on the palette that I was talking about, as I start working on this soap dispensers here for the restrooms, I'm gonna try to keep this idea of similar but different. And what I mean by that is, as we build different assets and different things in the park, starting with just the Storm Rock kind of themed area of the park, as I build buildings and different elements of it, I want to try to keep them similar in the way where they look like they blend together, but also different so they don't get boring and repetitive. And that's a very hard balance to kind of achieve. And the reason being because as you start constructing one building, it's easy to duplicate it and repeat the same elements. It's much more time consuming to kind of start from scratch on every building. But you don't want to totally start from scratch on every new building and every new element in your park, because you want them to blend together. So that's kind of something that you got to find the balance for, and I mean, I hope I'll accomplish that in this park. And since this is the first building in Storm Rock, well, I suppose the restaurant would have been the first building, but that one was much more integrated into the rock itself. This one will stand out a little more. I'm gonna try to use this and kind of build off of this palette that I've created for this first building. And what do you think I'm working on here? That's right, it's a urinal. When I say realism, I'm not messing around, people. This is something I've never done before. I decided, hey, what the heck, let's make a real life bathroom here. This is the men's side, as you guys would have guessed. And on the left there, those that I just built, those were the hand dryers. You just pop the button and that air blows out. Those dryers that don't actually dry your hands at all. You just put your hands under there for about 10 seconds, and then you just give up and dry them on your pants. That's how they work. But so yeah, this is my attempt at the urinal. I think I did a okay job. I mean, I hope it passes the inspection here. So tried to do a couple and give them a variety of heights. As you can see, it's quite the struggle figuring out what else you can possibly talk about when it comes to urinals and bathroom appliances. I promise most of these episodes will be much more exciting than this, but I did feel like it was a necessary element of the locker rooms, and that's sort of the difficulty when you start going down the realism path. You really kind of you start to commit to it, and then you realize how much aspects of realism you could be including in your parks. So I hope this is enough for the viewers, and certainly it was fun for me to include these little elements. It was fun to be a little more creative in the pieces and how to use those. So just going for a little bit of trim here on the sides of the walls. I'm not showing all this. Most of this is going to get cut, but just to give it that little splash of color. This is that lightish teal. It looks white, but it's got a faint blue to it, and it matches the walls themselves. Now this next technique that I'm going for is when I talk about building from the interior ground up, so to speak. This is a technique that I have used before, and what essentially what I'm doing is I'm making a ceiling without really making a ceiling. So I could have put just a flat ceiling across the entire locker room, but I found that when you do that, it just sort of looks like a big wash of blandness that just, it almost feels like it's, especially I think maybe because in this game the basic wall just feels a little short. So instead I wanted it to have a little more depth, and the structure just makes sense, and I think it's just unique. It's cool. So I added this beam lattice structure above, and you'll see in the cinematics it just gives it a little bit more depth in the ceiling itself. So that is actually the end of the episode. I'm going to be cutting to some cinematics, and I will see you all in the next one.